Hey everybody, Kyle Goethe here from GoatFilmReviews.com and the Kyle and Nick on Film YouTube channel, which you're currently watching. It is Saturday, which you know what that means. It is time for Saturday Scares with Kyle. And today we are talking about the classic film about the monster from space that comes down to an Arctic location and causes all sorts of mayhem. We're talking about not John Carpenter's The Thing, we're talking about Christian Nyby's The Thing from Another World, based on the 1938 novella Who Goes There by Joseph W. Campbell. This is the first adaptation of the short story that would actually have a few other adaptations, including the aforementioned 1982 John Carpenter film, which in itself had a 2011 prequel film that also feels very adaptation-y of the story. There was also the 1972 film Horror Express, which has often been considered an adaptation, a very, very loose adaptation of Who Goes There as well. So what you've got here is Christian Nyby directing the film for Howard Hawks. This is actually one of the first cases, kind of like how Poltergeist oftentimes gets criticized for people thinking that Tobe Hooper directed, or thinking that Steven Spielberg took over directing duties for Tobe Hooper in the film, which has long been debunked by everybody I've talked to about, including someone who was involved with the production. This is a film where people consider it as maybe Howard Hawks stepped in and did it because he needed the DGA wouldn't let him direct the film, and so he had Nyby as the director in name. He kept most of the $50,000 paycheck for the director and gave Nyby about 10% of it. So a lot of people think that maybe Hawks directed the film. In fact, some of the people in the cast have even said, well, he was kind of the director. The one person who I saw make the most notable claim was that Hawks was the boss on set, whereas Nyby was the director in every single possible way, but we all answer to our producers. So Hawks bought the film rights for $1,250. I think he had plans originally to be the one who was going to direct the film, but didn't get around to it, eventually hiring Nyby. This film is notable for a number of major reasons. It actually features one of the more unusual instances of having the credits at the end of the film, which was very unusual for this time. Oftentimes your credits would appear in the opening titles, but this one has one of those great titles where the thing appears out like the space writing. The 82 version of the film would follow up with that as well, as this was a favorite of John Carpenter, so it definitely had a lot of influence on him. Now, one thing that this film doesn't do that the short story did and that the 82 film would do was they both focused on the shape-shifting nature of the creature, and this film doesn't. He's very much described as a giant carrot, a vegetative creature who basically vegetables evolve differently from animals and humans on that planet where he came from. So he's basically a big vegetative creature. Played by James Arness, who was actually not happy with playing the role. In fact, it sounds like he skipped out on going to the premiere. He said he looked like a giant carrot, which is how they described him in the film. He does kind of feature a Frankenstein's monster kind of look. In fact, when they put the makeup on him and brought him over to look at Hawks, Hawks was so frustrated by the amount of time taken for this film that he said, put that Frankenstein thing on his head and get that going. So the film does kind of have a resemblance in some ways to a Frankenstein's monster from space, if you will. It also does feature one of the first full-body fire stunts. There's a sequence in which they light the creature ablaze, and we get to see that on film. The other fun fact about this film is actually that it's one of the regular rotations that the South Pole telescopic team would watch after the last flight leaves their station, as they would watch all the adaptations of Who Goes There. And I think that's definitely worthwhile. There's enough different between this film and Carpenter's follow-up in 82 that you could watch them relatively close to each other. In fact, I did. I recently rewatched The Thing myself and then watched this film just a couple of weeks later. And I found the same kind of thing. It's still a very dynamic film. It still has a nice hero's journey to it. It still has some great 1950s kind of B-movie monster from space vibes to it, so it's a very different kind of a film. And while I will always prefer the 82 film, this is a nice appetizer for what that film would be in a lot of ways. I think it's exciting. I think Kenneth Tobey as Captain Patrick Hendy is, I think, the standout in the film for me because he is juggling a lot of people out there who have different ideas than him. This film does feel a little bit like the 1979 film Alien, directed by Ridley Scott, and I believe Ridley Scott said that this film was one of his inspirations as well. So it kind of does make sense that he would enjoy this film because there is that company nature versus human nature idea of they're not supposed to kill the creature. They're supposed to only defend themselves, but not hurt the creature in any way. And of course, the main character has to make the decision because not harming the creature actively harms themselves. So how are you going to deal with that? I really like that this film kind of has that early style of the company's decision versus the man's decision for survival. I also really liked Robert Cornthwaite. He played Dr. Arthur Carrington. He was the science officer in a lot of ways, and again, kind of like the Ash character from Alien, where he is looking at the importance of studying this creature, and he makes an argument that is actually completely understandable. It's just at the cost of human lives. And there's an interesting idea where I kind of agree with him in some ways, but I also kind of understand that this creature is unknowable. We can't understand what kind of danger we're putting ourselves into. So it creates one of those things where even the human antagonist characters, you understand why they believe what they believe, and that makes the film very visually compelling from a storytelling perspective as well, because you understand everyone involved, even if you don't agree with them very much. You get their point of view, and I think that's what makes a really exciting, dramatic story that has some pretty cool sci-fi elements. And the film does take a little bit of time to kind of get its feet up and moving, but there's some great set pieces in there as well early on in the film that I think kind of facilitate that building of tension, particularly when they go look at the crash site. And have a whole sequence there where that almost feels like a movie where they're solving a problem and then, oh, we're done, it's over. Oh, wait, what's that in the ice? And then the movie kind of takes off from there, and I think that makes it wholly watchable again. And for an 86-minute runtime, it does breeze by mostly, especially in the last half. I think the last half is the stronger half of the film, but there's some really iconic moments in the first half that I think I wouldn't want to do without. So those are my thoughts on The Thing from Another World. I really enjoyed this movie. Again, I'm always going to be more of the original 82 Carpenter film, but I do also like this one. I like the 2011 prequel. I don't care much for Horror Express, but I've only watched it the once like 10, 12 years ago, so maybe I'll give it another go. But for what I have right here with this movie, I quite enjoyed The Thing from Another World, and I think you should check it out if you've only seen the 82 film. I think this one's worth checking out because, again, there's enough different going on in the stylistic choices made by Nyby and the team. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on the film down below in the comment section. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Saturday Scares with Kyle. Again, we're rounding out the rest of October here, so you can find more stuff, including this video, over on goatfilmreviews.com in the Saturday Scares with Kyle 31 Days of Horror playlists. Thank you so much for joining me. But don't make sure you come back next time. We've got a fun episode for you because I will be covering another Jose Ramon Larraz film. We've previously talked about Whirlpool, and we've previously talked about vampires. And next time we'll be talking about Edge of the Axe. Join us for that one.